This morning we're going to be looking at your liver, and your liver is the organ that is orchestrating the detox. The liver is often called the project manager because everything that goes into the body goes first to the liver, and everything that comes out of the body comes out under the jurisdiction of the liver. So what we're going to first of all do, have a look at what goes into the body and what the liver does with it. So we're going to have a look at foods. And never in the history of mankind have human beings eaten so many carbohydrates. I think you'll agree with me. We've become high carbohydrates consumers. You just go into any supermarket and there's usually a whole aisle devoted to bread, a whole aisle devoted to cereal, and almost a whole aisle devoted to pasta. There's certainly a large section devoted to cakes. Also, another high carbohydrate is pizza. Rice is another carbohydrate. Potatoes and products made with potatoes abound. There's your French fries, your chips, you call them potato crisps or chips. And then last and certainly least in nutritive value is the pure crystallized acid extracted from the sugarcane plant. Would you agree with me? High carbohydrate consumers. I don't think anyone just chose to eat that way, it's just convenient. And we're such a fast society that it's just grab, eat. But if you live on the farm, this is not fast food. All this has to be made. What's the fast food down on the farm? Fruits and vegetables. That's your best fast food shop, is your fruit and vegetable shop. All of these foods in the gastrointestinal tract break down to a singular structure called glucose. And glucose gets absorbed out of the gut into the blood, goes on the M1 main highway, portal vein straight to the liver. And then the liver determines what happens to that glucose. And the first place it goes is to the cell. So the glucose goes into the cell under the action of insulin. It goes through a 20-step pathway. And that 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate is the chemical form of glucose that gets fed into what's often called the powerhouse of the cell, because this 8-step pathway delivers to us 36 units of energy. What a difference. Now we're going to be looking at this pathway several times this week, so you'll get to know it well. But this is the first place that glucose is sent, is down this, it's called the energy pathways in the body that give us energy. By the way, the difference is oxygen. This 8-step pathway uses oxygen, which is why we get so much energy. This pathway, no oxygen, it's called the anaerobic pathway, but we'll look at that a little bit more in some other lectures. What we're doing today is looking at what happens to glucose. So the first place that glucose is sent, and it is the liver that's doing this, is to the cell to go through the energy pathways. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over, and now it gets stored. It gets stored like a little bunch of grapes. And they're little molecules of glucose, and they're called glycogen. Glycogen is a name given to quick-release glucose stores. Now your glycogen stores are there, and when you start moving the body and the body needs fuel, it starts plucking those glycogen stores, putting them through the energy cycle to give us energy. It's a wonderful process. Now, in a muscle cell, these glycogen stores are basically like in a prison. They can only be used by the muscle. But the liver also can store glycogen. And this glycogen can be sent all over the body. Yes, even to your brain. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over. And so now it gets stored in the most amazing fuel depot in the human body. It's called fat cells. And what's happening with Americans on this high carbohydrate diet? They're getting bigger and bigger. And when I go down to downtown Roanoke, oh, those people are big. They're big. And if you have a look in their trolleys in the supermarket, what do you see? You see a lot of this. A lot of this. So the third place that the liver stores all this excess glucose is as fat. Now can you see, I've just given you the basic science here, can you see that fat doesn't make you fat? What makes you fat? It's the high carbohydrate diet. And there is a doctor that made this very famous. His name's Dr. Robert Atkins. We've all heard of Dr. Robert Atkins. Very interesting story. He was overweight, knew his science, which was what I've just shown you. So he decided, he came up with a theory that if he stopped all carbohydrates, he theorised his body would start to live on his fat stores and he would lose weight. Did it work? Oh yes. His book was #1 on the New York Times best-selling book list 4 years running. Nutritionists and doctors hated him. Someone loved him. Who loved him? The people. And you know why? Because it worked. So what did he eat in his experiment? He knew that his gastrointestinal tract needed fibre. So 3 cups of vegetables a day. And the food with no carbohydrate was meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. So he had lots of protein. And in meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs, he was also getting lots of fat. So what was the result of his experiment? The weight just fell off him. When you're not giving your body these quick release glucose stores, your liver can convert protein and fat to glucose. Your liver can start to break down the fat stores to give you the glucose that your cells need. It's called gluconeogenesis, that's Genesis, is creating glucose from the fat stores. Was he hungry? Never hungry, because there's three foods that keep the food in the stomach longer. Fibre, because it slowly releases the glucose. Protein, because it's in the stomach that protein gets broken down. Fat, because it coats the food, so it takes a little bit longer to break down. So he was never hungry. Did he have energy? Lots, because of the liver being able to convert these to glucose. Has he found the perfect diet? So he put some of his patients on it. Oh, they loved it. They could eat everything they can't usually eat on a weight loss diet. Same thing. But you know what he also noticed after a year? Yes, massive weight loss, but diabetics were coming off their medication. You see, on this high carbohydrate diet, the poor old pancreas is getting screamed at all day. More insulin, more insulin, more insulin. But on this diet, the pancreas is getting a break and it starts to revive. People with high cholesterol levels came back to normal. And what are we told we've got to do if we want to get cholesterol levels down? Stop the meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. Am I right? Yeah, and the drug, that's true. The cholesterol levels were coming down. Atkins scratched his head. His cancer patients were going into remission. Do you remember yesterday? And I do admit I am guilty of information overload. But cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. So when you drastically stop these high glucose foods, the cancer cells can actually self-destruct when they're not getting the glucose they need. What Atkins discovered is that these 3 food groups are the essential food groups. What does essential mean? Body doesn't make, you got to put it in. Fibre is essential because our gut needs to be swept every day. That's what fibre does. Essential because it's in the fibre part of the food that you'll often get a concentration of your nutrients. Did you know that the highest concentration of nutrients in the potato is just under the skin? And when you peel your potatoes, you lose that. We're very thankful to Jamie Oliver, who got people to leave the skins on their potatoes. Protein is an essential nutrient because 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is made up of protein, whether you are 100-pound or 300-pound. This is the membrane around every cell, and we've got 100 trillion of them. The membrane around every cell is 50% protein. Remember yesterday we looked at the DNA, the crossword bands, amino acids, that's a breakdown from the protein that we eat. Protein's essential. You cannot heal without protein. You cannot function without protein. How did he do it? Yes, intense working out. But you know what he also did? He supplemented with protein. Every bodybuilder, what do they got to supplement with? Protein. You know that, don't you? Yep. Muscle knows no age. Whether you're 9 or 90, you can have strong, strong muscles. But building up those muscles requires protein. It's an essential nutrient. In the latter years of life, what's happening to people today? They're getting Alzheimer's and dementia. Did you know this is not normal? I've read the Bible and I haven't heard of one case of dementia or Alzheimer's. This is actually a new phenomenon. And it seems to have come right around the time that this fat phobia arose. Stop eating the fat, it'll give you stroke, heart disease, is that right? When did it really get momentum? Maybe about the 70s, 80s? No, that brain in the latter years of life, it must have adequate fat. Atkins found that these were the 3 essential food groups, but what he discovered was that the non-essential food group, what does that mean? You can actually live without it, was actually carbohydrates. Yeah. So what's happening with many people on this high carbohydrate diet, they're missing out on the 3 essentials, especially when it's refined, and they're overdoing the non-essential.